What's up? It's Matt Plapp, and happy Friday. We're back with our last edition of the Restaurant Expert Roundup of the week. We're here with Sam Knoll. He's on the grassy knoll, but he's not doing anything illegal. What's going on, Sam?
Not much. I'm having a good day.
So tell us a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your background and how you got into the restaurant world.
I got into the restaurant world probably 25 years ago.
Okay.
And started out kind of in college. There, I'll date myself, but started out in college working, kind of side jobs, and eventually waited tables. I was a dishwasher, bartended, ran a nightclub at one point. I kind of hit every option in the restaurant world, and then eventually decided I wanted to go to culinary school.
Oh.
And so I kind of finished up college, headed off to culinary school up in New York, and ended up back down here in North Carolina where I am now, and did a restaurant work for about 5 years here, and some of the headaches associated with the staffing side of it kind of got the better of me, and I said, all right, I'm going to switch over into something else, and I've been doing internet marketing work since then.
Nice. How long ago was that that you started doing that?
It was 2003, right about the time the internet began. No, it's
when Al Gore created it.
That's right, exactly.
So we've been in the game about the same time. I started my marketing career in 1999 and built a website in Adobe PageMill and working in advertising and radio at the same time. And then in 2002, left the radio world to run the family business. We started from scratch on the internet. And I remember sitting in meetings with Yamaha Motor Corp down in Nashville, Tennessee. And they wanted to know how we were doing all this stuff on this thing called Google. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, just doing a bunch of things in chat rooms and discussion boards and our website and page listings.
Back then you could do almost anything. It was amazing, and Google didn't yet understand all the controls they needed to have in place or even have the abilities kind of.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I always tell people it's all about your footprint, and it still is to this day. But I remember back then what happened with us. I don't think you know this story. You probably don't, because we're just meeting. Was we had a virus that kept happening on our computer. We had 40 employees at our boat dealership. My computer guy came in, put a tracking software so that we could find out what employee was downloading the virus. Long story short, it tracked everybody's usage. And he brought this book to me and said, hey, here's all these websites your employees are visiting that are not to do with the job, but they're industry specific. And at the end of the day, they were what is social media today. They were chat rooms.
Yeah.
About fishing and hunting and camping and ATVs. And so I went to each employee. I went to these chat rooms. And for whatever reason, the number back then was like $500. You could sponsor for an annual investment, $500 to be the exclusive, Yamaha motor dealer on Bass Boat Central. And so I did it, went to the employees and said, hey, a part of our sponsorship is you get to, in a non-selling manner, get in these chat rooms and have discussions. And literally 6 months after that, we were getting 2,500 visits a month, unique visits a month to a little one-location boat dealership. And we were dominating Google. And so that's kind of what launched me into this world.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. And I've done internet marketing consulting kind of almost since 2003, 2004, somewhere in there is when I kind of first got rolling on this.
Okay.
And it's just been really interesting to watch all this evolve and try to stay ahead of things too and figure out what's next. What's the next thing people are going to want to play with? Well, as social media has evolved, it's almost gotten more difficult, to stay ahead of things because everything's in front of everyone right now. But no, so it's it's been interesting. I'll kind of finish the very end of my story actually. I spent from 2011 to 2018 working for the largest biotech company in the world. And I was running one of their divisions, and I was kind of their digital marketing director. And so when I left there, I think our sales for our division were up over 1.2 billion. And so it was an interesting position, definitely. And so I left there in 2018, kind of middle of the year, And I've kind of taken a couple of years to figure out what it is I wanted to do. And everything keeps leading me back to food. I can't help it. I mean, I cook anyways. I have to somehow. Yeah. And eat out. If it weren't for the pandemic, that would happen more often than it does now. But the food thing kept hitting. And I finally said, you know what? I talked about writing a book, which was a culmination of stories from people who've been in the food service business. So after this podcast, I'm going to interview you probably, so you can. But that's kind of the way it worked. And so, because I have this huge batch of people that I know kind of across the country who've been in different parts of that business. Yeah. And so it's just kind of collecting their stories. And this was going to be a book. I figured, this will be easy. I'll just get them to upload stories. Everyone will want to do that. Well, no one wants to do that. No.
Well, I'm going to give you the cheat sheet of how to do it. I've written 2 books. I've got a 3rd coming out next month. And what you're doing, I've actually thought about, because I've done about 400 interviews in my day on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, and I have a podcast I'm flying to Utah for next week. But if I was you, you're right. Like, people, to get that from somebody's tough. But if you were to do an episode every week, and then once you get done with that episode, pop it into rev.com. It'll transcribe it, get it back. Yep. I won't say you're the person, but like my team, I have a smarter person than me, because I realize, like, when I go back and proofread and edit stuff and I give it to Tanya, it's like night and day. And the next thing you know, do that every week for 52 weeks. I think that would be a really cool book. 52 weeks of conversations with people just like you, restaurant owners. It would resonate with, I think, small business owners. That's exactly what I am doing, because it was funny. I'd always figured, all right, well, if I'm collecting these stories, maybe I'll start doing a podcast, and I'll interview some of the people who are telling me these stories. And as I got rolling on that, it occurred to me, oh, this is a lot easier to get people to hop into a Zoom call or something, or on the phone and talk, rather than get them to type something out and upload it. And so that's exactly what I'm doing. So I'm just kind of doing these podcasts, having a great time doing it. And the number of people now that are interested in doing it is also kind of growing as more people hear it. I think it's kind of self-fulfilling, which is kind of cool. And that's what I wanted. So, well, and I think 2020 has given people a lot of stories also. I just talked to a guy yesterday, Joseph, who owns a brand in LA. Used to have 2 restaurants called the Burger Parlor, which were just staples in that community, and Orange for burgers and milkshakes. Unbelievable. And when the pandemic hit this year, business was already kind of in a weird place. But when the pandemic hit, he's in an area with tourism. He's in a trendy part of town. He's in California. That's a whole other story. Yeah. And, he had to shift, and he ended up going to a thing called Jack's Tenders. He's got 2 locations now. He switched both locations, and it was like, it was his baby. Like, that was something built over years, and he had to pull the plug on it and switch overnight to something new. And he's transitioned. And him and I were talking yesterday. I said, man, he's like, what do you think I should do, Matt? We're talking about just different things in the business. I said, tell the story. Yeah. And get on Facebook, get on Instagram Live, let customers know like what you went through and what you're doing now, because they'll relate with you more. But from an entrepreneur standpoint, that's a tough story, because there's a lot of businesses right now that are holding on to a restaurant model that is not going to survive next year with what's happening. Yeah, the fact that he was able to kind of to adjust what he was doing and pivot to a different concept, that's a good example of somebody who probably will make it, because they weren't so tied to what they were doing. But that's a tough one, especially if you've been in the business for a long time. I've got other friends who are restaurateurs, and they're changing things up some, but it's. I've got one friend in Raleigh, the next city over from where I live. He's got 2, actually, I think at the top 2 restaurants in North Carolina recently. It was a James Beard finalist, I think 5 times, and very renowned chef. And I was talking to him about trying to raise money for people involved, who are hurting from this, this pandemic in the restaurant business. And that is something we'll do. And that was the other piece of this book that I didn't mention that was interesting. When I put this whole thing together, I thought, all right, this is kind of cool.
I'll donate like 20% of what the book makes.
Yeah.
I think that would be kind of cool. And I kind of solidified myself on that. And I went to bed that night and I dreamt that I donated 100%. And I woke up and I thought, all right, I don't know what to do with this now. I guess I'm going to have to do that. So that's the other piece of this is if this podcast will grow to a point where it can start generating some money. And then if it does evolve to a point where it can also generate the book, all of that's going to go back to folks in the industry. It won't happen as fast as everyone needs right now.
Yeah.
But that'll be interesting also, again, just to work with Scott on some of this, because we're just trying to think of other things that one can do. He's got to fine dining restaurants. People taking food out is only but so good. It never feels right. The packaging doesn't do it, et cetera. So we're trying to come up with things that we can get people excited about. And, that will, especially if we can get things rolling now and the vaccine can finally get distributed and we can get closer back to normal, we need to get people excited and rolling with all of this.
What part of North Carolina? You said you're near Raleigh. What city?
I'm in Durham.
Oh, okay.
Chapel Hill, Durham.
I've got family in Greensboro and High Point and Winston-Salem.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, nice.
And we have a couple of clients down there. One of them, have you ever heard of the Crazy Crab?
Yeah.
They're a client of ours.
Interesting. Small world.
Yep. So what's one of the so far in the podcast? And by the way, the URL restaurantrealityshow.show. What's one of the stories so far that you've heard in there? Because how many episodes are you in? A handful of episodes, right?
I think I've put up 6 episodes now, so we're kind of just getting rolling. But
what's a story that sticks out that makes you just because I'm sure you've already heard a bunch from there.
Yeah, it's been interesting because the stories vary wildly from, and this was a little of what I wanted also as I'm talking with people, as I wanted it to be kind of open. I wanted to talk about what they wanted to talk about. So I've talked with one chef who, unfortunately, he and one other guy are fulfilling the roles of 5 people right now in the kitchen, just the 2. He's working 7 days. They kind of shortened the day's hours some, but he's in essence, he's doing like late lunch to dinner that's done at around 8:30, all the way through. And that was kind of their only option, and it was funky. I spoke with another friend, and this was one that I think kind of spoke to me some for the business world as well as the restaurant world. But he was talking about how he recalls early on in his career being in a situation where you're in the kitchen, that little printer is just pumping out tickets nonstop. He's working a grill. It's got 40 things cooking on it. Tickets are still pumping out, and you can't stop. You just can't stop because you feel obligated. You've got people from the public out in the dining room who are there because of the quality of what you're producing. And so you have to keep going. You have to keep going. You hate every moment of it, maybe. But, it's just, and that's a little of what my friend who's, working the job of multiple people in the kitchen, that's the way he's looking at it. He said, there's no other option.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting hearing the push behind some of these folks. And luckily, these guys all have jobs. Yeah. Because not everyone does. I've talked to 2 other guys that I went to culinary school with who, aren't working right now.
Yeah.
I mean, and I suppose they're collecting unemployment and for a time that works, but ultimately that's not a full-on solution.
Yeah. Typically that type of person, that type of personality, the last thing they want to do is not be perfecting their craft.
Correct. Yep.
So that's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, I talked to somebody the other day, a person I know in the business that left the brand that she was with because they had went from 80 employees down to like 15. And her role in marketing had shifted from marketing to survival, which she was fine with for a couple months. She was doing everything. Well, then it got to where it's 4 or 5 months in and you're in the kitchen 6-7 days a week and you're not supposed to be in the kitchen. You're a marketing person. Yeah, you're a brand person, and there's a lot of people being pulled and pushed in different places that aren't comfortable for them. And there's a lot of owners and operators that that are putting in. A lot of them are accustomed to long hours. That's not the thing. I think it's the type of hours they're getting. It's the fact that those long hours, those 16-hour days a year ago. Okay, it's a 16-hour day. It's what we do. We're hustlers,
right?
But it was with 10 people. Now it's with 2 people. And it's doing a lot more stuff.
Yeah, and I think they find themselves doing many tasks that they weren't doing prior to the pandemic. That's the other tough part. And again, in this restaurant world, I think it's nothing. If you've been in this business, it's nothing that anyone's afraid of. Yeah. But one of the reasons that you build that restaurant or restaurants and you build it up to a point where you hire other people to do these things is, yes, you can do it, but you don't necessarily want to. Yeah. You want to build this business. And now they find themselves with things shrinking back down, and their only option is to make food or to be bussing tables, or rather than trying to build their business. Yeah. Yeah. It's been this whole thing's been very interesting.
So if a restaurant owner or a person from the business wants to be on the show, is it go to restaurantreality.show? Can they request? Can they reach out to you there?
They can. Actually, I've got to, that's a good question. I need to redo my site this next week. Okay. Because if they went to samknollbook.com, okay. If they went there they can set up time with me. Okay. But I'm gonna switch that over in the site this week. That's the other joy that I have, is besides doing the podcast and doing all the marketing for clients, I also get to be the webmaster. So yeah, that's the way it goes.
You get to create. So in closing, what's the ideal restaurateur you'd like to talk to? Is there certain specifications, number of locations, type of operation, or is it anybody with a story that will resonate?
I think it's interesting. I think it's anybody with a story. It doesn't matter what that story is. And I'll throw this in. I've talked to folks who enjoyed talking about the hazing that goes on in restaurants. Yep. And I talked with folks who are talking about how hard they're working, and other folks who are not working and what they're doing instead. So it's getting those stories in and different perspectives. Okay. I'm talking to a lot of the folks I've talked to have been chefs, not necessarily restaurant owners. Yeah. And I'm talking to some more owners now, and that brings in this other perspective behind the whole thing, because it's this whole other piece to that business that I understand, but a lot of other people listening don't get a lot of that. So definitely single restaurant owners, regional chains, whatever it may be. Those are the folks that I'm kind of enjoying talking to right now. I'll talk to anyone. I talked to one. I know we're getting a little short on time, but I talked to one friend who actually works for a biotech company at this point. He's one of their marketing directors, but he also had 10 years in the business, in the restaurant business. And so that was fun to talk with him, because we got to talk about all the fun stuff that went on in the restaurant world. But then it also verged out into what he's also dealing with at work right now. His division is actually making the machines that are producing vaccines for the pandemic. Wow. So it's just this whole other perspective that came in. And so that's the other fun part of this, is people who are in the restaurant business, or even if they're not anymore, but they were, any of those would work.
Well, cool. I love it. Well, I look forward to pointing some people in your direction, and look forward to talking more and checking out the episodes. Keep up the good work. Anything in closing you'd like to say?
No, I just, I think everyone knows that we need to support local businesses. Everyone knows that they love going to the restaurant up the street when they're able to. I think we went through a period where folks were ordering out. They were tipping really well. I think we're getting a little past that, and people just are done with the whole thing. Yeah. And I want people to remember that this will end, and that they do need to keep those restaurants going, because it's not going to be a whole lot of fun if we get through this whole thing and suddenly There are no restaurants down the street to go to. You can't go get a great glass of wine or a beer or a great meal. So they do need to keep supporting them. That's all it is.
Yeah. And one thing I was telling a friend of mine back when this started, because they didn't look at it this way. So you got to think about it. Look at all the smiles and the laughs that you and your family have had in establishments the last 10 years. Those are directly responsible from those restaurants giving you the ability to sit out there. Yes, you were doing business with them, but they provided a service that allowed you to do something a little different, not be at the house. And now it's their turn. So now it's your turn to get back and do things and help get through this. And I have no doubt we'll get through it. And this year right here can't get any harder. So get into 2021 and put 2020 in the mirror.
Exactly. Yep, I agree.
Well, hey, I enjoyed it. I look forward to talking to you more, and I'll make sure to send some people your way. Thank you, Sam.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.